So kind of a hodgepodge today about tool handles, and we're going to make a scratch awl. So when you're making a wood handle, the wood fibers are good when the handle's solid and full length. But up on the end, when you insert your metal, obviously the wood fibers aren't as strong, and so we need to reinforce that. You're going to end up, especially at the lathe, you may have undue or unexpected pressure and torque on the handle itself. So we always put, we always put a metal ring or some type of reinforcement on the tip of the wood, where the transition from wood to metal goes. So there's all kinds of unique ways to do it. I know Jerry Jensen, probably a couple years ago now, he did the adjustable, what do you call it again? It's the plumbing fitting where you can interchange the tips. And so on the end of the your handle, he has a kind of a lock nut setup that's a plumbing fixture so that you can put different cutters into it. So that's handy. But if you want dedicated, then we can go with something down this line. So a lot of the standard ferrules come as a brass fitting, but if you have some copper tubing, copper plumber's pipe, there's brass nuts and things that actually work out pretty good. If you're very careful, you can actually turn these on the lathe then and get rid of the facets and make them nice and smooth. And then this is just a piece of brass pipe that I couldn't throw away, and at some point I may cut that into small pieces and make small brass ferrules. So today we're going to make an awl handle and probably go through the steps on making a full-size handle, and then everybody's going to get an awl. It's a kit. It's got a ferrule with it, and the I don't know what you would call it, but it's the steel pointy thing. It's the awl of the awl, and everyone can take one of those home. Steve has a box of them up there, but I do ask that you give him your name, and then he's going to check them off. Okay, so you'll get the awl, and then you're going to get 3 of these brass ferrules like this, so that you can just use miscellaneous if you want. A little bit of a disclaimer: I was looking for inexpensive options for these ferrules, and I found these. These are for like pneumatic hoses. So if you were to have a metal fitting with a rubber hose on it, and then they use these fittings, and then they would have a press or a crimpers that would go over it. And so these are a little bit thin. They'll work just fine as long as you size them right for your tenon. You could use a little bit of epoxy glue inside if it's a little bit loose. That's not a bad option. But if you pound them on, you may bend them. So that's the only downside. So I apologize. I thought they were a little thicker, but when you order off the internet and they show up, that's you kind of get. But again, it's a nice thing to practice with too. So you're not out any money if you give it a shot, and then later on you could put it in with the copper. So Al Osterman was nice enough to bring his pipe cutter in. If you're going to use like copper pipe and you go to cut it, the wheel on here compresses that rim, and that ends up being smaller. So that's okay if it's on the outside end of your tool, because then it kind of chamfers over. But if you're going to slide it on, it's in the way, and you can't get as tight a fit. So then you have to find a way to chamfer that bit. And if you have the cutter, there's a piece on here that, I don't know what you would call it, a reamer maybe. And so then you would go around and get rid of that burr that's on the inside edge, and it should do a pretty good job for you. This is maxed out. You got a nice large piece of copper and a small reamer. But anyways, that would work out good. And then another option, and I don't know who started doing this, but I read it in David Ellsworth's book. You can also use string. So this is a very strong twisted nylon, and a twisted string will stretch a little bit more than a braided string, okay? And I think that's important. And if I have time, I'll just show you how to do it where you can end up not having any seams show. And after you wrap it, and then you trim the ends so you don't see them, then I just put a little bit of CA glue on here, and then it locks all of that in together. And I've had quite a few catches with no bad with no bad results. So, ferrules. So I think we talked about this a little bit. I'm not familiar with what size to use with a what is it, a Morse taper 1? What's on your mini lathe? Is that a Morse taper 1? Those are 2s? So this isn't a Morse taper 2, right? Oh, okay. So I think I saw this probably on the AAW site, but basically somebody made a handle and then put a gun cleaning brush in it, and then you can use that to put it into your Morse taper and kind of clean that out once in a while. Also, you can use the same idea, and then this is Scotch-Brite. So I have a little copper loop put on here, and I thread the Scotch-Brite in. I would probably just put a light spray of like WD-40, and then I roll mine up like this, and then I'll put it into, I'll put it right into, this is a Morse taper extension, like that, and then just kind of give it a twist, and then that'll help clean that out, and then you're going to get, you know, better seating, and you less chance of, I don't know what you call it when the Morse taper slips, but then you get all those grooves and those little burrs on there, and then that's bad. So that helps eliminate that. So what we did here is I made a handle. No, actually, it's going to be too tight for me. I made a handle, and I put an insert in the end, and it just there. And it's got the same thread count as the brushes on the cleaning brush. So then you can pop this in and out. Actually, if you had a cleaning set, I wasn't going to buy a full set, but a cleaning set for guns actually has, you know, one of these loops. And so then you could unscrew the brush, you could twist that loop in there and go. So if I have time, if the awl goes quickly, then I'll put a block of wood on the lathe, and we'll put the insert in the end of the wood. And I have, I don't know, 5 or 6 kits like this that we'll throw in the wood exchange. So it's got the insert, the brush, and a chunk of wood. So if that's something that you're interested in, if the awl demo goes quickly, then we can walk through that, but it's pretty straightforward. I don't know, can you focus on this? I don't know if you can see that, but these are those little brass inserts. And then all I did was I took a bolt of the same thread, 2 nuts, and you lock them together so that they don't move. You can thread the brass insert on the end, and then you put this in your drill chuck attachment for your tailstock, and then you can get it turned in nice and straight into the hole that that we bore into one of these. So again, if we got time, we'll do one of those quick. All right, so the handles. Now, when you make a handle, I've had varying degrees of success teaching myself how to do this. And if you look, this one's crooked. It was intentional, Jerry. Yeah, because my arm is always 7 degrees off. It's kind of the way I stand and the way I think. 7 degrees off or so. But anyways, I made the handle, I drilled the hole after, and then you end up with something like that. So the big tip when you're doing handles is to round it out. I like to hold it in a chuck. I never tried doing it on a spur drive, but I would imagine some people have. But then you drill the hole before you shape your handle. So what you'll do then is you take your cone center. Oops, not that one. So just for the sake of visuals, after you drill your hole in a square blank, and then the tail end of your handle will be sitting in the chuck, then you would center it like this. And that way when you turn your handle and you make all of your decorations and you fit your ferrule, you have a better chance of being straight and non-center. So that's the big tip when you're doing your handles, is drill the hole while the blank is still square. And then we're going to violate that. All right, so a little, I'll give you a little bit of what I learned with this Awl kit. And I'm I guess a little disappointed in the ferrule that comes with it. But there's workarounds. So I went to Taylor Tool. They had the best price on the kits. And it said it came with a ferrule. Didn't really say what size. But I'll pass this around so that you can see it. It's got the metal shaft and then this small brass ferrule. So I was looking at it, and it looks a little bit dainty for a tool. But I thought I'd give it a shot. And unfortunately, this was the first one I made. And I don't know why, but I wanted to use one of those ferrules that you're going to be getting today. And so I put that on here first, and I made the handle. And then in order to set the awl into the handle, basically I put it in a piece of thick wood, and then I just pounded on the top, and it was good to go. And that worked out really nice. So you could see when I pass these around, the small one with the large brass ferrule worked. So then I was ready to get my favorite piece of scrap wood, some exotic hardwood, and I turned a really nice knob and sanded it and made it look nice and pretty. Let's see here. There we go. That's a little better. And I put the ferrule on it that came with the kit, and when I set it, it cracked it all the way up. So then I was like, uh-oh. I ordered 60 of these kits. So figured, well, I might as well figure out how to do it so that we don't have 60 independent learning sessions. So what I ended up doing is, if I can find it. And I'll pass this around. Let's see here. So that, like I said, the kit shows up with that ferrule and then this awl. If you look at the end of the awl, it's been stamped so it gets flattened out. So it's skinnier here, but when you look at it like this, it's wider. And that was too wide for the 1/4 inch hole. So I'll pass this around just so everybody can get a look at it. What I ended up doing is I set this on the grinder and I ground off those humps. And by doing that, this ends up being somewhat rectangular, and the measurement from corner to opposite corner is still greater than the diameter of the shaft, but it's smaller overall. Does that make sense? And so I think you'll be fine if you do that. So that's one option. And then the other option would be to drill a bigger hole, and I think it'll still stay in friction fit with a 9/32 inch hole, and you'll have better results. Not guaranteeing anything. Or you could go a little bit bigger yet, gauge this yourself, and then epoxy it into the handle. So you have a couple of options. I personally just like to pound it in and move on. So a 9/32 inch hole, you can see, is actually too big for this when it's ground. But if you use the 1/4 inch hole, you can see that it'll still be tight and good chance. Yeah, actually, I might even. There we go. We're back in business. All right, so that's one thing. And I'm going to pass around this this little rack of awls too, so you can kind of take a look at it. So these three have the awl kit basically, except the one has the larger ferrule on it. And then this was my second attempt. You'll see that cracked. On a third attempt, I think I ground it just a little bit, but not enough. So I took off those high spots, and it looks okay, but there is a small crack that you'll see. So that's the topic for today. However, if you go and you're interested in making your own and you don't want the kit or you want to do something else, there's been a couple people on YouTube that posted variations to that. So if you would take just a bolt and you chuck it in your drill, first you can take the hex head, and as it's spinning on a belt sander, you just real carefully or real lightly. You don't want to push down real hard, but it'll take it right down to a circle. And then you flip it, and this was a little more difficult. I'd have to find a little better way of doing it. Maybe somebody's got an idea. But I only had a small piece of the head, right here. I only had a small piece of the head to hold it in the chuck, and then I held it on the same belt sander and and ground away the threads till we had a point. But the reason I'm pointing this one out is a lot of people want to hit it with a hammer. And this, when you put it in, then you drill the hole all the way through. You drill the hole all the way through, and then you put in just a little larger hole at the top so that this fits in there. And then, you know, I would probably rough up the shaft a little bit, put some epoxy in there, and then go into business. As you can see, this one was made in the USA. And this, on this one right here, this is basically I cut off the head, but this is the same bolt that I just used for this particular one. And you can get a look just for different options. So anyway, we'll pass that around. All right. So now we'll get into any questions on that at all? We'll jump right into it. Yes, Mark. Oh, an Allen wrench. Yep. There you go. Oh, really? Nice. Yeah, an Allen wrench. That's a good idea. Plus, if you had a little undersized hole, right, then they'll friction fit in there. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Very good. Oh, if you're going to make it out of a bolt, I just had that one sitting around. It was a softer steel, but you can actually go buy hardened steel bolts. Steve, were you going to say it? Oh, okay. Yeah, it's just so buy a bolt, quarter-inch bolt that's got that extra hardness rating. So, all right, good. All right, I already had my block center punch, so we don't have to watch that. But and then remind me to take my tail stock. Yeah, it's well. And I think it's the same as like a one-way. So the collar here rotates versus on the Powermatic, just the inside rotates, and so then you'll have to drop your little pin in there when you put the cone on and off, and this just goes a little quicker. And then, is there a smaller tool rest over there? Could you grab that for me? Thank you. Thank you. All right, my chuck likes about a 1 3/4 inch tenon, and I should have had this one all measured out, but I'm going to just set my caliper quick. So another thing too, I'll admit through the years I've been kind of lazy and I didn't always tighten my tail stock. But I have noticed that when I tighten it, I get much better performance out of the tail stock, and because just that little bit of pressure that you get from the set screw on these will keep your center from moving and vibrating, you'll have a little less vibration on your spindle as you're making it, and it's more obvious on some lathes than others. Plus, it keeps it where you want. You know, I've seen other professional turners. They don't lock it, but they'll turn and then they turn and then they tighten it and they turn and they tighten it, and you never see them hit the set screw. But yeah. So so he's turning it with the green wood because the green wood is moving, is constantly moving. Interesting. Yeah, it makes sense. All right, so we got this on high. All right. Yep, that'll work. I'm not used to the safety drive centers. So the first thing we're going to do is just put the tenon on it so that it fits in the chuck. She's still pretty square. That should be fine. So I picked up these jaws, these extended ones, and they come in pretty handy when you're turning small items and you're getting your tool close. When you have the traditional jaws that are about, what, like a ½ inch deep, they tend to get the larger diameter of the chuck closer to you. And the corner's not, I think will be fine, but probably need a little better shoulder there. Well, I use them two ways. Right now, my tenon is only about a ½ inch long, okay? And that should be fine. If you have a nice shoulder, usually the shoulder is what makes the grip, right? So you want a nice square cut on your stock so that that's resting against the face of the jaws, and then this should be plenty. But another advantage of these jaws, and I've seen a lot of others do them, is they open them up and you can just put like a 2x2 all the way down in them. And that works just fine. However, if you're trying to save wood, you know, then there's a big chunk of wood there that if it's just to hold it and it goes to waste, you know, I'll probably try to avoid that. But if you, let's say you're making two things out of one chunk of wood, then you could run it all the way in to begin with. turn your first item and then pull it out and turn another, another awl handle, another bottle stopper or something like that. Yep, absolutely. Yeah, I don't know if you could see that, but I think this is similar. Does that look similar? So there's a dovetail on the end, so you can use it like a regular, like the other shorter jaws. And then inside it's got grooves. It's serrated so that you could put in a longer straight tenon. So, but they are handy. Not everybody has the luxury of multiple chucks and multiple jaws, but this would probably be one on my short list if I was to like start over and get a couple of different things. Because this does the same thing in most cases as the short jaw, but it gets it away from the body and gives you a little more clearance. This is a Nova. Yep. Yeah, probably a Supernova. Yep. Okay. So, let's see here. So, for this particular project, we're looking at a chunk of wood that's about 2 inches by 2 inches. When I made some of the other ones, a couple of them were as short as 4, and I was able to put a tenon on them and still, but that's getting a little tight when you go to part them off. So if you have the wood, I would recommend like a 5 or 6 inch piece of wood to do your awl handle. But again, you can customize it any way you wish. I'm going to try the ferrule that came with the kit today, and then I'll use the one that I ground the edges off of, and we'll do a quick test to see if that was enough to grind that off. This is cherry. Every wood will respond different too, by the way. So the one that blew out on me was an exotic hardwood, and it was really hard. It was like you could just feel it like chattering as you're cutting it. You could hear it like cracking away at some spot. And I don't know what it was. It was something I probably picked up at the raffle. But cherry is kind of a medium wood, right? It's hard enough where you can not be afraid to use it for tool handles. A lot of tool makers will use cherry on like their hand planes and stuff for their totes. So it's a good wood for that. And I think that this will be more forgiving when you drive that in and knock that off. So the tools, I'll just be using the roughing gouge, spindle gouge, parting tool, and maybe a little bit of scraping to help if I want a nice little curve. If you look at the shape of my awls, I like grabbing them from the top, and I like my fingers to have a nice smooth surface to kind of pinch them in there. And so a small scraper will help give you a nice smooth cut on that. And then 4-jaw chuck, which I got in here, we'll get the drill chuck out, and we should be good to go. Yep. Any other considerations? Yeah, actually, some of the, I use YouTube all the time, right? And you go out there, some of these individuals will make awls, and they want to hold them like this, right? So you're going to have a longer handle. It might be a little more oval, but you want to have room for your hand. So and they want to pound on it. Thus, the one that has the metal going through it. My hand is fairly big, but the ones that are making its way around, those are all good enough for me, because typically it's like a one and done. I'll put it on my spot, I push it, and then I'm done with it. Use them frequently, but I put them down. Another interesting thing about awls is, like I got an old, this was an ice pick. You're good, you're good. So this was an ice pick, and there's a lot of times I'm doing other projects outside of turning, and I want a real skinny little alignment tool. And so you can like run this through a hole, and you can line it up with another piece of whatever you're building, and it's handy. I ended up getting all round awls in this batch. I thought I was going to get a 50-50 split with that birdcage awl. Birdcage awl has 4 facets on it. Instead of being round at the tip, it's got 4 flats, and it's kind of diamond tipped. And anybody familiar with Paul Sellers on YouTube? So like he just loves his. He'll have 3 or 4 different diameters of birdcage awls, and when he's mounting hinges, he puts them in and he twists, and he has a hole to start his hinge screw. When he wants to go all the way through a board, he'll just keep pushing, and it drills all the way through. As long as those 4 facets are crisp and clean, it works as good as a drill. And as long as you're not, using hickory and and ash, any of the softer hardwoods and all of the pines and stuff, can be drilled through quite easily with just a square bit. All right, thumbs on with that. I've said this before, but especially if you're kind of new to turning, one of the things that I enjoy the most is trying to perfect my cut before it matters, right? So here I got this shape down on here, and you're always trying to finish your project and have the best surface as possible. Whereas when it's roughed out like this is the best time to practice your cut. So the roughing gouge itself, to me, is one of my most enjoyable tools. So the roughing gouge can be used just like a skew. The skew is flat, and you rest it on there, and you get it beveled just right, and you pull it across, and you can just get a glossy surface all the way down there. But I can do that with my roughing gouge. So what I like to do is you get it started, and another key thing is when you're making a longer cut, don't use your arms, use your hips. You're going to do a dance with it, and get that on there. And it usually takes 2 passes to get rid of all the bumps that were there. But if you have you got the tool rest parallel with your wood, you just start to rub the bevel, and then don't move your hands anymore, and then just rock your hips. And I mean, you could start sanding that with 180 or 240, and you're done. So that's just a nice technique to practice before it matters. So don't wait until you have your final shape and you want to do that. Do it when you're roughing out. All right. Speaking of that, we want to drill. We want to drill. So oh, look at that. You know what? Better do that again. I think I was doing chatting and I didn't bite down on that. Right? Right? Yeah, exactly. See what happens now. Oh, look at that magic. All right. So that awl has a 1/4 inch shaft. The other thing you got to be careful of now is, and I told Ed that I would make, if we needed, I would make a handle for one of his pieces of tool steel, and it was .472, which is 12 millimeters. And I'm going like, oh man, I don't have any millimeter bits. And I checked 4 places around my house, Home Depot and Fleet Farm, and they go up to 10 millimeters with the bit, the bits that they'll have. But that's something to kind of watch with this particular activity, because the diameter is important. All right, so now I'm using a spur drive bit, so it's a wood bit that's got the center point and then the 2 wings. I'm a big fan of going really slow to get it started, and if you're drilling and you can get that first 1/8 of an inch straight, then you have a much better success rate of going in. And if you go slow and you're a little bit patient, a lot of times if it wants to cut off center, it'll scrape enough where it'll allow it to go straight. And I've also had good experience if it starts where the bit starts to waver a little bit when you're going in, increasing or decreasing the RPMs. Because what happens is you get that harmonic bounce to it, right? And if you slow it down, then it'll give the bit a different, I don't know what, movement pattern or something, so that it can actually find center again and go through. So don't be afraid to slow the speed up and down if you see your bit wandering a little bit. All right, what am I doing here? There we go. Is that showing up okay? And a 1/4 inch bit is actually pretty wobbly. So with my thumb on it, I can feel the vibration before you can probably see it. And again, as I'm going in nice and slow, I feel pretty good about how it entered. I'm doing pretty good. And the other thing is, not everybody has a drill bit sharpener, but if you can, make sure you're using a new bit, a fresh bit, or a newly sharpened one when you're doing these, your success rate's going to be a lot higher as well. So that's going good. And then I did forget one minor detail. I want to go 1.5 inches in. So I used to go off of my the scale that's on my quill, which isn't bad. But then I find myself getting a little bit impatient where I'll say, oh, if I just loosen the tailstock and pull it out, I can clean all the wood out and then push it back in, and then I lost my reference. So lesson learned for me is, yeah, just put a piece of tape on there. The other thing I have at home, and I think I forgot to bring it, is I just bought a cheap paintbrush, and then because these bits get hot, and I just use that paintbrush to dust them off and get rid of the swarf. Another thing too is Paul and I went out to Utah for a class, and they were teaching us, Mike Mahoney and Kirk to hear. They gave us these drill bits and a drill chuck and told us to drill into wet wood. And if you're trying to get your drill bit to go straight into wet wood and you waste time, right? You want to go in and out on wet wood. It'll heat up. The water turns to steam. It expands the wood. It grabs the drill bit. And don't ask me how I know, but it took the drill chuck out of the tailstock and it flew it on the floor. So it's just like, yeah, you could predict that. So wet wood is more apt to grab your drill bit than the dry wood will. Okay, so I got my 1/4 inch hole. It's 1.5 inches deep. I think if you know, some people like a shorter awl, so don't be afraid to drill yours deeper if you have a bigger handle. The whole concept of the awl is you want it to be useful, and if your knuckles are closer to the board that you want to put a spot into, have at her. That's what Paul Sellers likes. All of his birdcage awls are very short so that he doesn't have to stand above them very far. All right. So the other thing that's just throwing me off is I typically don't turn a lot of small stuffs, and I'm too lazy to change my belt. So I'll always just go up to about 1,000, 1,100, and then this one I'm about not even halfway, and I'm already at 14. I'm going like, wow, that's fast. So I'm going to cut down the end a little bit, and then we're going to prepare that. We'll prepare the end to hold the ferrule. And where did I put my ferrule? Let's see here. And then to start with, because I'll cut stuff 3 or 4 times and it'll still be too short. And the remedy to that is to cut it longer to begin with. So if you, hello. So what I do is when I measure, I'll use my calipers on the ferrule, and I'll measure the outside width. And that way I bought myself a little extra as I'm getting it down to, yeah, right? Yep. Yeah, and so the other thing I like to do is I'll use the front 1/8 of an inch kind of as my standard for getting everything rolling, right? So the idea is I will cut that off later and not have to impact it at all. I got to be a little closer. So this first cut is the diameter of the outside of the ferrule. And the ferrule is about that long. So I'll take my parting tool, and a nice sharp parting tool really helps here. And I'll make this section the same diameter, and you watch the shoulders, because as you're cutting in with this 1/8 inch parting tool, you'll have just a little bit of a ridge from the first cut as you get down there, and that's kind of your initial guide to get it parallel and straight. So now this should still be oversized for the ferrule, right? So it touches right there, and we're good right there. So I'm going to take my parting tool now, and I'm going to bevel that front edge just a little bit. And I'll bring her down just a hair. And then we'll see how close we are. And this is the boring part. I don't claim to be fast. I'm kind of half fast. All right, so it won't even go on there yet. So another thing that I noticed with my parting tools is every once in a while the tip's not 90 degrees on both sides, and that's not always a bad thing. So if you see that, just take advantage of it, because it'll help you get a little tighter into the corner. It might allow you to hold your tool off to the side a little bit if you're close to your chuck. Just be aware of how big the bevel is, how big that angle is. See, I'm extra cautious because I can't mess up real in front of this crowd. This is a tough crowd. Another thing I noticed when I was doing viewing research on some of the others that are doing this is some people prefer to have a little bit of wood stick beyond the ferrule, and some want it crisp and cut off. So that can be a design feature. You want to be a little bit design conscious when you do it, and try to get a nice little bevel on there if you got enough room. This particular one is going to be so small. I think the inside diameter leaves less than 1/8 of an inch on both sides. So you're not going to have much real estate to put a round edge on that nose. And I know I'm going to touch this and it's going to be too small. Yeah, it is. But that's why I did that front end. So we got a gauge. So now this first cut is just slightly undersized, and that's okay. I know I got to get close. And then the other another tip for you when you're doing this stuff: does this light make it too bright and washed out? Yeah. But another thing is instead of using your cutter when you get down like this, you can use sandpaper, and it's a little more forgiving. And it's just as effective when you're getting close to that size that you want. All right, so that's fitting on there kind of tight. What I'll do frequently is I'll just put a pencil mark right on there. And now I can erase that pencil mark, right? And that'll give me just, a logical reference for what diameter I'm trying to get down to. Yep, that's getting pretty close. So I'm going to stop with the cutter right there and try to think where I put my sandpaper. There we go. So the ferrule, or excuse me, the tenon on here is actually, it's loose. It's loose enough where I would still want to glue it if I was trying to finish this project today. I'm going to have this like looking like it's finished, but it won't be fully assembled permanently. I'd probably put a little bit of glue in there with the ferrule, and then drive the end home. So it's still just a little tight. And I think that'll be actually, I pushed once too hard. Oh, there we go. That's right where I want it, because when I get, if I pop it on, it'll stay right there. In fact, I think what I'll do is I'll leave that on for now. I won't be driving it home. But it'll give me a reference now when I cut down the shoulders of the handle to meet the ferrule. All right. That's kind of, I guess, you got to think of a couple things, right? If you can get it tight, that would be the way to go. And my best experience would be when I have a thicker ferrule, right? And I have two of them. Then I can use one to drive the other one on. Does that make sense? And then you can get a nice tight fit and it'll probably stay. But if your wood might be a little damp and it shrinks later, you know, you're going to risk having that slide. And so there's a lot of people that'll just put a dab of epoxy on the wood and rough up, scratch the inside of the ferrule before they drive it on. And I think you're a little bit better off. A lot of the tools that you buy, I don't know if I have any here. Yeah, I do. So this is, actually it'd be on here too then. So this is a Sorby, and when they put them on, they just take a center punch and they'd put a divot in there to keep it from coming off. So that's pretty common. If you use those plumbing fittings that are threaded inside, you can actually crank those right on with your threads too. So you're doing bigger, and that's not a bad option. Oops, I wanted this one. Okay, any other questions? Well, you're keeping it centered, right? So if you have any slop, so like right now, I don't know what that is. That's probably close to 10 inches out from the main shaft. And if you have any run out, it's 9.5. So you get 9.5 inches hanging out like this. It's pretty easy to get it out of alignment. And then when you're cutting, you know, I'm not cutting much, but I know if you're cutting something heavy, that's a bad idea when you're just holding on to, you know, a small tenon like that. So it's really just to ensure that it's turning true and that you can get off just a small amount all the way around. Now the creative part. Oops, and I should have. So again, I like my handles. You can kind of see them. I want to be able to get my claw around the front. And you can add decoration any way you want. We could put a little bead down here, which maybe it gets a bead today. So I keep putting an extra bead at the top of my cove, and I'm falling into a rut. So I guess what we'll do on this one, we're going to round this one off. We'll put a bead at the top. The other thing is the officers, we exchanged some emails. We're going to have a summer challenge of making your awl. Okay. So you'll have until August to make your awl, and when you bring it in, everybody that brings it in will get their name thrown in the hat for drawing. So we'll have a couple of gift certificates. It'll be random, so just because you use expensive wood doesn't mean you're going to win. But yeah, it'll be fun to see all the creativity that comes out of making an awl handle. A 2x4, right? You know, I got a beef to pick with Terry. So I was writing the president's letter, and I have a warped sense of humor anyways. And so in my letter, I was referencing framing lumber, and I wanted to reference a 2x4, and I wrote TUBAFORE. And I sent it to her, and she corrected it. She made it 4x2, a 2x4. And I'm going like, wow, she must think I'm really stupid if that's how you spell it. I'm going like, yeah, maybe I ought to warn her ahead of time that I got humor in my letter. Yeah, yeah. 7% off, Joe. That's right. That's my 7%. A 2x4. Since this is again, a tool you're going to use with the palm of your hand, at least that's the way I use it. Make it hand friendly, right? So you want the top to be broad and smooth so that it sits in the palm of your hand. And if you have to push on it a few times or maybe hit it a little extra hard, it won't be uncomfortable. This one will look like an acorn. All right. So I was talking about scrapers before, and I think everybody knows this stuff. So humor me a little bit, but I just think it's good to reinforce. So on a spindle, you got the grain that's oriented with the bed of the lathe, right? And everybody knows that when you're cutting, you want to cut from large to small, and it works the same with scrapers. Frequently, I'll see people use a scraper from small to large, and you can get a noticeably better cut if you're using your scrapers from the large diameter down. So just kind of keep that in mind as you're trying to finish your projects. Start at the larger diameter on a spindle, and then scrape it and go down, and you'll get much better results and a lot less tear out. Even though the tear out is really small when you get to this type of a technique, it'll help. And then it's something that you can leverage with your other projects. So I have this real small scraper, and I'll kind of start where the inside curve goes, and we'll kind of finish it out like that. And then scrapers to me are the tool that I don't use for long durations. So I'm a big proponent of buying the budget tools for your scrapers, because you're just going to be touching and cleaning up on cuts that you would have made with maybe your favorite bowl gouge, your favorite spindle gouge, or something like that. I happen to run into this, which is it's kind of a budget tool, Cryotech. I think it's just a house brand from Craft Supply, and they had a closeout on these, and I did have to hone, but I had to hone even my expensive ones too. Hone the top of them to get them as smooth and shiny as you can before you put your bevel on them, and you'll get better results. And since this one, what is that, like 3/4 of an inch, I think? So it's a 3/4 inch, which is pretty wide for a straight scraper, but it's really handy when I'm trying to do these outside curves, and that's kind of what I wanted to bring up. So you want to round those little tool marks and your little humps. You can real carefully go around like this until I just start to go downhill with the cove. and that's enough that the sandpaper can fix it. And the same thing going into my little bead on my left side. So notice I'm pushing it now from the right to the left because it's large to small. And quite often this can be done with sandpaper. You don't have to get a scraper to do a lot of this, but okay. So I think I got this pretty clean with my tools. I'm actually going to start with a 280 sandpaper on here. Again, this is a tool for me. I'm not going to spend a lot of time, make a lot of dust, but it should be plenty good for something that's going to get thrown in my toolbox. And I'll touch up these corners real quick. And now remember, we drilled this with a 1/4 inch bit to fit the shaft of the awl. And so to finish the top of this, I made a little jig with a 1/4 inch dowel. So you take some of your jam chucks, sorry for the malfunction here. So I just took a jam chuck and made a little tool. And it really helps get the tops nice and crisp and ready. So right now I have 5/8, 3/4 of an inch up here. And so I'm going to round this over and get it to the shape that I want. And then I'll part it off, use a sander to get rid of the nib, and then we'll reverse it to do the final sanding. I'll show you. It works out pretty nice with this particular project. Make sure you got enough space so that you can get your gouge in here. You're going to be cutting almost vertical on this surface by the time I'm done, and you want to be able to get your tool around. Alright, so that's my 1/2 inch. And I'm going to swap out now to my 3/8 inch. Gets a little tighter, a little cleaner in there. And obviously you got to keep nibbling away both sides so that you got your tool clearance. One technique that I use on the bottom of my bowls is I don't think you can see that here, but I'll intentionally leave like one cut higher where I'm gonna break it off, because the fibers quite frequently will break into your project, and so leave that a little oversized, and that way it'll still sand off easy, but help you reduce your tear out when you're parting it off. All right, I got really small. Didn't need to, but I'm just going to loosen this just a tad. Hear it? Can you see that okay? Okay. There. So, and that's the nib that we got on there. Okay. So I took a jam chuck, and since I already had my 1/4-inch drill bit all set, you know, I recentered it, made it as true as possible, even though it'll change every time you move it, but it's still pretty close. And this 1/4-inch is just tight enough on my dowel where this will sit on here, friction fit. Okay, and we turn her way down low. And see, this is where I always had problems trying to finish stuff by hand, because you get such a better, you know, smooth surface if it's turning, right? Uh-oh. Nope, here it is. Another thing I found out through trial and error, some woods, when you sand like this, they're like cherry is probably one of them, and my hickory did. They'll turn brown on you from the heat. So don't sit and grind on it and try to get it. You know, when you get to this final stage, you know, just do quick passes on it and make sure that you're not creating any heat. I got 2 of these now because I got lazy. I didn't want to change from 2 to 3 inches. So I bought another drill. But yeah. Right? So I'm not going to spend, you know, a crazy amount of time. But you know, if you push too hard on here, that friction fit will slip. But you get the idea. This will help you get a nice smooth top, and you'll be ready to rock and roll. All right. So we ready? Should we do this one? All right. So do we have? Yeah, right there, Jerry. If you want to hand me those ends. So we drilled the 1/4-inch hole. We put the small ferrule on it, and I told you I had some problems with them. So we have two options today. We have the original, which is what everybody's going to get, and then this one I modified at home before I showed up, and I ground the humps down a little bit. And I'm hoping that because this is cherry. Oh, and I should get that ferrule on a little deeper. I think I had another ferrule floating around here. So this was your question before. How tight do you make it? I'm just gonna leave this one on, and we're gonna use another ferrule to push it on that last. I don't know. It's like a 1/16 of an inch. You're not gonna be able to see it. I'm gonna go right here on the bed. This is just brass, Kelly, so we should be fine. I'm putting the spare ferrule down, and I'm gonna run this one on, right over the top, and I'm just gonna tap her a little bit. And now that's all the way on, and we know that it's on there nice and tight. Okay. Again, you're not going to be able to do that with those cheap ferrules that Tim Harteau bought for you guys, because those things will bend on you. But if you have some thicker brass ones, the copper pipe, I think that'll work out just fine. All right, what did I do with my wood? So here's my backstop. I got my ferrule here, or my awl, my metal awl. And again, I ground this off, and I'm crossing my fingers. I forgot to bring my mouse pad. Are there any of those floating around here? You got one? One that I can beat up on? I'll put a little tape on here too. That's okay. I got a soft hammer. I just taped the top, Pete. We're good. So here's what we're gonna do. It sounds pretty solid now. It looks, you could kind of hear it soft, and now I think we're in. And I don't see no cracks. That might be the ticket, huh? Use a little softer wood, grind off those. You can pull the blue tape off there too. All right. What do we got for questions? Yes, Terry. Those were 1/4 inch machine bolts. Yep, 1/4 inch. Oh, if you can, I like the small one up here is like 1.5 inches, and I like them a little bigger. So if you can start with a 2-inch block of wood and try to keep it to, it might end up 1 3/4. And that tends to be pretty handy, but it's a personal preference, and you might have an issue with a toolbox or something that you want them smaller. But yeah, I would say, start with a 2x2 and then, give it a shot, a 2x4. So on these little tools, again, I don't think you need a ferrule on these. There's no stress left and right, but it's actually probably be a good practice. However, if you're going to use a ferrule, the ferrule diameter's got to be small enough where it'll fit inside of your Morse taper. So if I pull off the brush on this one, and I just stick the handle into the Morse taper, I catch it like right here, right? And so hopefully the brush is long enough then to reach it to the end. Does that make sense? So that's your key. If I was to do this one over again, I wouldn't put this little bump on here. It seemed really cool, like kind of sporty, like a sports car kind of thing. And then I found out it was just, good paint on a crappy old car. So, but anyways, that's what you're looking for. Something that's long. This one doesn't have that collar, and if I just put this in, you can actually see on this thing right through the cutout there that it goes all the way to the end. And if you take, like your live center and you measure the Morse taper on there, you just copy that. Because if it's the same size as that, then you add the brush on it and you got plenty of depth. Let's see here. I'm gonna have to do a tenon. Where did I do with that? Look at this. Look at this. I'm gonna go. I better not. Everybody will hear that. Alrighty. So what I'll do quick is turn a tenon. It'll fit in my other chuck. I have a chuck with smaller jaws. Yeah, and that's so I can see it. All right. Oh, look at that. I missed on the other side cleat. Guess I needed 2 bullseyes. Yeah, that's better. All right, so I'll be using my small jaws right here. And in order, for time's sake, I need to make the shoulder way up here. So I'm going to make this a little smaller so that it can fit through the middle. And I'm just going to smile. I don't like that safety drive. But I know it's necessary. Yeah, what is that? That should be good enough. Uh-oh. I have the sneaky suspicion I forgot to bring the wrench. Ah, no, I did. You know, when you forget, 60 scratch alls sitting on your workbench, the freebie that all the members are getting, then you feel like you're gonna forget something else. Yeah. So just for the record, I got a couple different brand names of chucks, and there's 2 different ways you can turn them to tighten them. It's like, I thought righty-tighty was standard around the world. But did they? So the new Nova chuck does? Yeah, sweet. Yeah. All right, so these inserts are made out of brass. And because of that, they're soft. And if you're turning your handle out of a hard wood, you can break them real easy if you don't size the hole correctly. So what we want to do, and in those kits, I actually put a measurement on there. And oh boy. So if you're going into hardwood, I forget what it was. Threw all my instructions on the wood exchange table. What was it? Thank you. 15/64. Perfect. All right. Now what did I do? Right in the drawer, right? So what happens when you move your shop here? Try to do it with the others. All right. So what I did is we turned the tenon on the chunk of wood, and we put that, this is mine, we put that tenon into the chuck, and before we tightened it all the way, I made sure that the center of your tailstock was in the wood, and that helps for alignment, right? Because that's what you want. You want it as straight as possible. And normally, I've had pretty good luck with the dimple from the cone center on the tailstock has been enough of a starting point to do the drilling. And make sure we're down low. And I got my 15/64 drill bit in here. This is a little softer than the hickory, but we should be fine with this. And if you look, this one did wobble just a hair. It looks like it's going pretty good now. Again, sharp drill bits make a world of difference. In wet wood, you're going to struggle a little bit more because the wood heats up and it expands and grabs your drill bit. And we don't need much in there. I actually probably over drilled it. Not on this one. This is a traditional high-speed steel bit. On my 1/4 inch, I did. And I'm drilling a little bit deeper than what we had to for this. And it was a sharp brad point, and I just like the way those perform. It does a nice job of scoring. All right, so I have the hole in there, and because we're putting an insert, I don't want to put the live center into the insert yet if I'm going to shape this, right? So we'll come up and we'll snug that a little bit. And then we'll pretend that I'm making this a precision diameter tool for cleaning out your Morse tapers. And actually, I can get good results with my, this doesn't only have to be used for roughing. You can use it for finish cuts. And see, I turned my hands. I should have been moving with my hips. And we'll see where that gets us. Plenty. All right. So now we'll go back to the chuck. We'll take the drill bit out, and we're going to put that, and you know what? I got a little bit of a challenge, I think, with this one, because I noticed my the two machine nuts on here weren't pulled in tight, so it's not going to work until I fix that. So what do I have to do here real quick? I'm just taking these two nuts and jamming them together so that they provide a solid anchor for the insert. And I think that one. So that's all we got here is, I'm just trying to think what the thread is. I forgot already. This is a number 8 32 thread, and that's the same as the brushes. And Put that in here. Try to find where I get that one out. These brass inserts, they have a front and a back end. The back end has a little, two little grooves in it. Looks like you could put a flat screwdriver on it, but don't do that. I did that and the brass chipped. This is a much better way to put them on. So this this little thread, we'll just put it on here. It'll stop. Right now, it's as far as my fingers will turn it, but it'll stop on its own once it gets resistance with the wood. You know, I should got to clean that end first. My bullseye's on there yet. We got to get that off of there. Or cleat won't let me live that one down. All right, so this is all handwork from here. Don't try to power thread this. That's a bad idea. So we'll bring that in. And I'm just going to put a little bit of pressure on my right with the hand wheel for the tailstock. And right now, the brass is spinning because it didn't hit the jam there. Now it just stopped. And I'm just trying to keep, with my right hand, I'm trying to keep the slack out because the wood is pulling that brass insert in on its own. This just keeps it straight. And right now, I bottomed out, so we're done. So now, let's see here. How do I want to do this? Yeah, I'm gonna I unlock the tailstock here because we want the tailstock to move until I can, there we go. Now I got this, this is just easier. Because if we left that, oh shit, it stayed on, look at that. All right, so lessons learned, this isn't hickory. All right, so who's run into this before and can give me a good, I drilled the hole too big then, didn't I? Right. What's that? Yeah, it'll, oh, you could put it in with a screwdriver now, I suppose, because now the threads have been cut. But that's, there. All I had to do was loosen it. Now it came, now it stayed in. You could put a little spot of glue in there if you needed to. And, you know, we could turn this later. You see how we did that with the awl handle. So I think this gives you a pretty good picture of what we did. All right, I'm done. Yep.